Welcome to the Surviving Business Show. We hope you're all doing well today. This is our show that we love to talk about how businesses and how you, as a business owner, can affect your world and can affect others around you. We've had such a great time talking through this show, and we've talked about things like movie theaters, shopping malls, Tesla, all kinds of other types of businesses. And we wanted to make sure we keep doing that for you today. And today, to start it off, really want to talk about a topic which we think is really near and dear, at least to my heart. And hopefully, for those of you who join, you'll feel the same way about this. And I think it's very important for us to kick this off in a way that we really enjoy. So hang on, and we're going to kick it off with our usual business corner conversation. So, the topic for today that I think is very key, and I hear a lot from lots of people, is around ageism in business. This is pretty important because all of us as people out there, we deal with this. I did not know that ageism was a real thing until I hit a certain crossroads in life and my age started to begin with a four. And I started to realize that there was a definite focus or there was a definite concern about ageism. And it goes in both ways. I've met people who specifically focus around the fact that they are at a certain age. And so that means that their life is over. They're waiting for it to end out. So, one of the key things I want you and those of you who listen to the Rise in Business show, to the Surviving Business show, to think about is the fact that when you start a business, it does not matter what your age or your uh, or where you come from. Because sometimes people who are older will say, "Hey, well, I'm older, so hence uh, I can't start a business." That is so full of mess. I heard recently from I have a lot of friends who do this thing. Hey, David, how are you?
I'm
Where
good.
I was just talking about ageism, which is our topic in the business corner for today, about how a lot of friends of mine love this movie called The Founder, where the guy who started off McDonald's was in his, I guess he was older, he was in his 50s when he kicked it all off. And I said to myself, well, that's pretty fascinating. But at the same time, when I talk to some of those same friends and I talk to them about their own business, they're like, nah, man, it's over. I'm just waiting for I retire or whatever they're thinking about. And quite frankly, I'm talking to all of the people that are out there. One of the key things about business that you've got to really consider is who are you around? So if you're around people who are not like-minded in regards to what you're trying to accomplish, then you're going to, they can actually be an impediment to you being successful in business. So I've tried to, in my own personal travels, tried to surround myself with people who think like me, whether it's people in the entertainment world or whether it's business people. Really think about how do I create a business and how do I become an entrepreneur and how do I grow? Because if you're around people who think negatively about that, then you're going to really struggle around it. So that's a real key for all those of you who are out there. If you're 17 years old, it's the right time to start a business. If you are 75 years old, then it's the right time to start a business. They are all important things. And when David comes back, I'm sure he'll have some comments on that. So, Dave, welcome back. This whole concept of ageism in business is what we've been talking about here this morning, this afternoon. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I My new role where I'm a teacher and I meet with a lot of these young students. I find that a lot of them have this desire and they want to be their own boss. And I had a conversation with an administrator just on Friday where I was telling him that I was interested in doing if we don't have one, some type of entrepreneurial club or, giving, some guidance to the students, on how they can do their own startups. And he completely like when I said, well, yeah, we had this investment club before, and you can teach them investments and blah blah blah, and stock market blah. And I'm like, yeah, stock market and entrepreneurial, two different things. Both are great. Both have great ability to make money. And I'm from the financial world, so yeah, I can teach finance. Yes, there's no problem with me being able to teach students the basics of finance. But finance and entrepreneurial endeavors, two different things. How do they reach their dreams, and how do they achieve those things that they really want, versus how do they operate within the system and make sure that their money does the most for them that it can do, right? And these are students, right? So these are children. So for me, they already have this motion and set in mind. When I was a young kid, all I could think about is being an entrepreneur, right? I went to college. I was like, yeah, I know I want to be a business owner. And that guidance right there is so important at these young ages, because those same young children, if they're not given the proper guidance and the tools for them to achieve that, at some point they become the guy who thinks just like how that administrator thought, where teaching them something that's finance and relatable, on how you can budget and blah blah blah, is the same as teaching them how can they realize those dreams, right? And so often, even us as parents, as you become older, you want the best for your children, and you think like, yeah, I want the best for you. I want you to go and get a good job. And, not that anything's wrong with going and getting a good job that pays you really great money. But for those people who have that urge and that desire to be entrepreneurs, I think too often we kind of dim that light sometimes, right? Rather than pushing them towards it.
Yeah.
I'll speak to a personal thing. So I remember when I was graduating from college down in Atlanta, and when I spoke to one of my finance professors, and this is when you were starting up everything with the comic book company, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to take 2 years. I'm going to work with my brother on his comic book company. Blah blah blah. She's like, well, you probably really should get some real world experience, working for, public companies, blah, blah, blah. And, I kind of took her advice, like, yeah, that's a good idea. Meanwhile, the truth of the matter is, had I said, forget working for them, and I spent 2 years looking for work, I could have been working with you and getting real life experience on how you start up a business and being like foot deep, knee deep, and saying like, how do we get this thing off the ground and how do we really make it work?
Yeah.
So I say those things to say that it's not that it's a thing of age, right? Because I think that a lot of times what happens for youth is that, we get diminished, or I'm acting like I'm young, but, the youth get diminished, a diminished value of how do they achieve that goal of being an entrepreneur by the adults that have been set in a manner where they're kind of like, yeah, this is the route that you could go. And then you can pursue that at some point, right? And a lot of times for some of those adults, they never pursue it. To me, I would like to say you're never too old to start a company. You're never too old to start doing what you truly love and your passion. Everything from the 70-year-old person who gets their doctorate degree, to the 80-year-old person that decides, I think I want to start selling t-shirts, whatever it is that's your goal and that you think that you really, you can do and you can make money and it will make you happy doing it. Hey, go out there and achieve it. And we're just here to give some guidance on how you can do that, whenever we can.
Yeah, that's a real thing. And it's so interesting that we both got that same advice that you mentioned that person was giving you. And in a way, it's led us to here, right? So we've learned a lot along that path. At the same time, I am of kind of a feeling these days, especially when I talk to young people, is that the youth, when you're young, is the time to do it. Not, when you're ready to do it, just do it now. Learn as much as you can about life now. Now, we've learned a lot by taking the paths we have, and neither of us resent anything that's happened. We're just talking to people who are out there now. Like if you're ready to start a business now, no matter what's happened before, all that's happened before has gotten you ready for the moment today. For you to say, this is the moment to do it. Yeah, this is the moment. Don't let people try to put you in a weird box. They say to you, say, well, you're 60 years old, so you can't do it. Or you need 10,000 bits of this to do that. No, this is the right time to do it. It really is. And I really wanted to talk about this today because I see this so prevalent. I see young people afraid to do anything or to pull the trigger because we as parents and grandparents have kept them in that old 1960s mindset that of just continuing to do things like you're in a factory. But then I also see people who are older who have that same mindset. And so Business Corner today is just really get out of your own way. Just go ahead and make sure you got it going today.
Yeah, I would always say that there's so many different ways for you to, look at, the thought of how do I start, right? And I think a lot of times that's what the biggest step is, right? How do you start? I've met with so many people where they're like, I want to start a business. How do I start it? Can you work with me on the business plan? Yeah, I can work with you on the business plan. The business plan is only a plan, right? Nothing happens because you have a business plan, right? It's a plan of action.
I want to add real quick there that I get that same request, and that request is not that request. They think that they want a business plan, but they're really asking like, hey, I want to start a business and I don't know what to do.
Yep.
I don't know what to start. And so the first thing is like, oh, let me do a business plan because I need that piece of paper that tells me, but that's not really what you want. You really want something you really want a vision about what the overall thing is before you do the plan.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add that while you were sharing that comment.
Yeah, and I mean the plan is important, right?
It's important
because generally, if I start working with someone on their plan, you start finding out all the things that they didn't think about, all the things that they didn't know, right? But to some dismay, the funny thing is that there are so many entrepreneurs out there that go and start without a plan. Right. Not saying that that's the route to go, but I'm just saying that there's so many people that do it, right? That say, forget it. I want to open up this supermarket. I'm going to go and open up this supermarket. I want to have a deli. I'm going to have a deli. I want to have a bar on the corner. I'm going to buy the bar and I got some cash and I'm going to put it in there and we're going to make it work. Right. The plan is important. If you're trying to get somewhere on a map, having a map is part of your plan, right? And figuring out how you're going to get from point A to point B, that is 100% important. But if you never get in the car to drive where you got to go or start walking or hop on your bike, you're never going to get there. Yeah. So that's the action is just as important more important than the plan. So when you're thinking about it, I say, yeah, work on your plan, work on, putting things together. But remember that the plan does not create what you want. The plan helps to guide you to get where you want to be.
Yeah, I've heard a pastor share something, and I think I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but it's around your direction and your momentum determines your destination, or versus hoping and wishing. Because sometimes your analogy about the car, sometimes that analogy can be just another distracting point to not getting started, to not hitting the gas and letting it go. Because here's the truth, people who are listening to us today. You can have the most fantastic plan in the world, or you can have no plan. You are going to find out something once you start that you didn't know. Is going to happen. You're just going to say, well, that's the whole point. That's kind of the exhilarating thing from my perspective about starting a business, because you learn while you're doing. You just do. And so you got to make sure you take one step, one slight, tiny atomic step towards what you're trying to get to.
Yep. You're gonna, just saying exactly what you just said 2 seconds ago. There are going to be tons of things that you're going to find out that you didn't know. I mean, and regardless of how great your plan is, that's not going to like stop that from happening.
It's just not.
Once you start a business, once you start running a business and you start doing things, you're going to find out that things don't work according to plan. They need almost never work according to plan. But having a plan is still helpful.
Here's a quick bad analogy, and we're about to talk about something here differently in a minute. So if you had a business plan, you were ready to go, and you were like, I got all of my T's crossed, my I's dotted, and you're ready to go in January 2020. Right? In March 2020, there's a very decent likelihood, it's just good that you had the plan, but it's a very decent likelihood, I would say a high percentage, that you had to change. You had to pivot whatever you thought you were doing on January 2020.
Yep.
You just had to shift it over.
Yep. There's a very good likelihood that what you planned that you were going to be doing, let's say that you got to the point where you had your project plan down and you're like, yeah, so in March, we're going to start marketing and, then we're going to start, we're going to open the doors for June, blah, blah, blah. That those times that you set might not be the same times that you start ending up seeing that you're actually running into, right? And that there's some things that, on that whole map guide that you had where you thought that you were real intricate and you figured out every little thing that you had to do, that, there was some hurdles that you didn't realize you were going to have to jump and climb. So, this is not to tell you that it's the most difficult thing in the world to start your business. This is just to prepare you to say like, hey, when these things happen, don't be surprised because it always happens, right?
That's right. And start now. So let's do this. So struggle this week. We had talked about what we're going to talk today about, surviving versus thriving. And at first, it seemed like we had a good idea what it was. But as I thought about these two technological things that we're going to talk about in these next couple of segments, I was like, which one is the surviving and which one is actual thriving? And so the first topic, and we're going to let the audience decide this time as opposed to us just telling you what we think. So the first one we're going to talk about is what is very prevalent and very much out there these days, and that's around digital coins. And so, and in digital coins, there's all kinds of things around it. So I'm going to talk about a couple of bits and pieces here associated with that, just to get this thing going on. And so this is a little stat that I pulled out from Statista, the website, and I thought was pretty interesting to look at. And this is just around the number of cryptocurrencies worldwide from 2013 to 2021. These things are accelerating. This conversation today, audience, is not David and I trying to educate you on blockchain and cryptocurrencies, etc. This is way too complex. I have a passing and a decent knowledge of it, but this is one technological thing that's exciting to me in a way, but at the same time, it is something that there's still more to learn. There's still a lot more to learn in regards to this. It's pretty exciting, the fact that it is all out there and people are buying them. You've probably seen all kinds of tweets from people, all kinds of messages online, like get into cryptocurrencies, buy as much as you can, or buy this one, or buy that one. And that to me tells me a lot, being around as long as I've been around, that it's hot, number one, that people definitely want to get it. They want to get involved in it. But then there's also some other things that we'll talk about in regards to challenges or risk associated with it. So that's our topic for today. So you audience that's out there, whether you're listening to us now or you're listening to us at some point down the road, we want you to help us to decide whether you think this is a thriving business going to the moon, or what do you think is something that has some inherent risk associated with it? So, David, what's your view?
So, cryptocurrencies, very interesting, right? So the financial world has looked at these things ever since their first mention, since Bitcoin, as an anomaly, as something that's so different than the way that current money structures operate. And I would say the invention of cryptocurrency, and blockchain, and the technologies that go along with it have aided to make our financial system move a lot more efficient, a lot better, and a lot more consumer friendly, right? So, without cryptocurrency, things like Venmo and Zelle and being able to move cash from my account to your account, Junior, in like less than a minute, just would never have happened. Banks would have said,
Right.
no way are we doing this. Investment in technology and knowledge to try and figure out how can this even be possible. They didn't care. They're like, yo, we get crazy fees from you having to write a check and put the check in the mail, and then for Winston to receive the check 3 days from now, 4 days from now, and then him having to make his journey over to the bank, sit in line, go to a teller in order for them to cash a check. Right.
That sounds so painful now that you say it, even though that was the truth. That's a decade ago or so. And this is like, now that you describe that thing, it sounds like such a process. Oh my God. You know how much time is inside of all those things you just mentioned? A lot
of time, right? A lot of time. Everything from writing the check to to cashing the check. And then okay, so people said, all right, so I can go to the bank teller. Yeah, that was a big not bank teller, to the ATM, and actually cash my check. That was a huge innovation for banks, right? They say, yo, we're going to put that so you don't even have to wait for a teller. 24 hours. You can get it a cash. That was a huge innovation. They were ready to just stop right there. They would have just stopped. But then it was like, wait, hold up. These cryptocurrencies, they're coming up. And if we don't make cash more accessible, people are going to want to use them more, right? So like Bitcoin was like, yeah, Bitcoin had been trying to get in the stores and trying to become the currency of choice for a long time. And if you ask me, one of the biggest reasons why it didn't succeed was because banks and the financial systems around the world said, no, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that cash remains dominant.
Well, isn't that part of the whole deal? With the technology, was decentralized. And so a lot of the inherent fees in that whole chain you mentioned, all those people that were involved in the process, they wouldn't get their piece of the action or piece of the transaction because it's all decentralized on some ledger somewhere that's automatically encrypted.
Yep.
And so they didn't need all of those in-betweeners. I would say that I've seen a lot of articles, and maybe you have too, that some of these players that you just mentioned are like, yo, we got to get involved.
Yep.
So we got to jump in.
So that's the interesting thing, right? So now we move to this day, and all right. So you have Coinbase. They just went public, right? Which is really the suite where you can trade and get into any cryptocurrency that you really need to, right? That's the big thing about Coinbase. It's the platform that didn't exist before, right? I want a cryptocurrency, and if I can get cash in a Coinbase, I can get that currency without having to go places where before, if you wanted Bitcoin, when Bitcoin first started, you had to like almost go on the dark web. It felt like you had to go into the dark web to try and get that stuff. You had to get this key, and you had to try and figure out how are you going to make sure that you maintain this key. And so many people have lost the key, and that's where this whole idea of coin mining that's out there, all these people, they just say, forget that. I know how to write programs and I know these programming languages. I can just sit here and I can just code all day to find some currency and find money. It's like, if I walk out it's almost like the gold mine hunt back in the day, right? Where everybody was going west and they were like, yeah, we want to go and try and find some gold. So we're just going to start hitting on wood. hitting on stones and seeing if gold was going to fall out.
do those little pans in the water, right, to see if
Yeah,
little gold will come out.
exactly. And they'd be like, oh, I got fool's gold, right? So we got a lot of fool's gold that's out there in cryptocurrencies, right? And I would call fool's gold all of these currencies because there's so many of them, right? So if you I think the stat that you showed that there's like 4,000 cryptocurrencies right now.
It's incredible. And I think I was talking to you about this, that back when when automobiles first started 100 some odd years ago, at one point there was like 500 automobile manufacturers in the United States of America. And if you looked at it, and we all know that today there's not that many, right? You can count them on two hands how many automobile manufacturers are in America, because there was a shaking out that occurred at some point. And I think you'll see that the same thing with cryptocurrencies. All 4,000 can exist. It's just not that many that you can't do it. Like the one that started as a joke, which is now popular now, the dog coin or the doggy coin. It was a joke, and now it's one of the most popular ones.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, you can't use it to buy anything, right? So that's the reason why IRS, they look at it, they say, hey, this is like capital gains, right? Which is the scary thing about Bitcoin and all of these things, right? Because yes, the coin moves, right? So you have an inherent risk when you go and you say, okay, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. I mean, if you bought it, let's say like 4 months ago, that inherent risk, you feel like there is none now, right? Because it just went through the woodworks, right? But when you buy it, you get this capital, right? Like, let's say, for instance, I wanted to go and buy, a pair of sneakers, and I got this Bitcoin today. I say, let me go and get the sneakers. I'm gonna go and get them in Bitcoin. And I go, and my Bitcoin ends up moving from, it's $100 today, and it moves to like $150 by the time I'm about to go and get the pair of sneakers. I take my Bitcoin and go and get my sneakers. Oh yeah, I'm buying my sneakers in Bitcoin if that was possible, right? Now, all of a sudden, when I bought these sneakers in Bitcoin, according to the IRS right now, $50 of that I owe capital gains tax on. Right? So it's like, okay, wait, hold up. I got a tax bill that I got to pay. Not just the sales tax that I had to pay, but now I got a capital gains tax to pay. So now I really had to come out my pocket some extra dough in order to get it. I'm still winning, but I've just complicated a simple transaction of me going to buy a pair of sneakers to me buying a pair of sneakers, paying sales tax, and then at the end of the year having capital gains tax that I have to declare on that particular selling of that asset.
I would have to say that there's people out there who probably have zero idea of the description you just mentioned, the process you just mentioned for a transaction. There are many people, I believe, right now that have no awareness about what a transaction would be, because the whole concept was that it would simplify a transaction. But the way it was just described there by you is that you can actually have it more complicated, and you can actually put yourself in a tax liability perspective. And on top of all of that is that none of this is insured by things like FDIC and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So because there's nothing backing the asset, right? So, in a good situation, it goes from 100 to 150. What happens when it goes from, 100 to 50 in, those 3 days where you want to go and get your sneakers, and then, you got a loss. You got a loss. So of course you can't get taxed on the loss, right? And maybe you can write off some other gains when you go and buy something next week and it goes up. But now you got this complicated situation. But where did all of this come from? Where did the complications come from? This came from the regulators, right? And if we know anything, we know that government does not move fast, right? Government is always lagging. They're going to move slow. So by the time that the IRS realizes what's going on with Bitcoin, blah, 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 what's going on with these cryptocurrencies, we're talking about something that's been around for some time. We're talking about something that they've had their eye on. They're trying to figure out.
It's got to be about 10 years in the background. Oh, yeah, at least. Yeah.
Like 10 years. And, in 10 years, we can start regulating now. We can start thinking about how this asset class should be looked at and how should we really be thinking about it. Now, regulation and this goes for any business, right? This is one of those things we're talking about. This goes across industry, across, whatever you want to do. You got to think about the regulatory implications. And for Bitcoin, well, not even Bitcoin, but coins, they have a tough hill to climb, if you ask me, when it comes to regulators, because the same people who are regulating their industry, which is creating these coins, which is alternate currency, to the currency that the regulators want to see stay in power, right? So you got this situation where it's like, if you were playing basketball, you're in the NBA and you playing basketball on a team that has all the refs on it, right? The team has all the refs, and they calling their own fouls and they calling their own shots, right? They're like, yo, nah, you out of bounds. No, I wasn't out of bounds. What do you mean? So, that's the uphill journey, if you ask me. Now, an interesting thing is that because of how the coins have been moving, as we start seeing some of those regulators start creating their own coins, right? So that's going to be the interesting thing when you start seeing governments say, like, all right, let's create our own coins.
Well, there are. I think there's definitely some movement afoot. You made a comment earlier about the speed of transactions and where we're trying to get to, and there have been organizations out there like the Clearinghouse that are doing these real-time payments mechanisms. So you and I, we go back and forth. All of a sudden, the banks get everything settled behind the scenes, and so there's been a blockchain effort. There's a fantastic podcast called Federal Blockchain, and some of the work that they're doing to use the blockchain technology, which is the basis of all these coins, in order to make payments go faster. So there's a war afoot between people who really want to get a lot of these digital currencies and the technology that exists already, whether it's infrastructure built by the Fed now or the Clearinghouse or some of the other brands. Some of the card brands are buying up technologies to do this as well. So if you think about a MasterCard or a Visa, they're all in play. Everybody's in play because they know that currency is to your point, you made such a great point about currency being this gold. The tricky part for me, and this is probably where I come in with the surviving perspective, is that I can see the bubble associated with this, like for real. I don't think they're going away ever. I don't think digital currency is going away ever. But there is a bubble, in my view. If you've got 4,000 or whatever, how many thousands of digital currencies that exist, all based on a certain technology, human beings like to gravitate to something at some point. You and I, if you and I want to make a digital currency right now and we were making an NFT or one of those things, it is unbelievably easy to do this. It is like you and I, we could take the next half an hour and just figure out how to make it. And we have one called David and Winston's digital coin or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then people can start to speculate on it and buy it back and forth. That to me tells me there is a bubble. And your other point about there being a gold rush, it's true. People are trying to get in because they want to be one of the survivors of this whole thing. They want to be one of the survivors of it. And so that's why I think about it as surviving and thriving at the same time. Because when we're talking another 5-10 years from now, those 4,000 ain't gonna be around.
No, it's not gonna be 4,000. Well, so the interesting thing about coins, right? Where they're probably different than let's say a website, right? So if we can remember the .com boom, which is a lot more recent than when cars were created, right?
So giving a history lesson for people who didn't know. Dude, I'm an educator too, sort of.
Yes, sir. But the .com boom, everybody and their mother was coming out with, their website that was supposed to be able to change the world, blah, blah, blah. We had tons and tons of different browsers. We had tons and tons of different ways for us to get on. We had the Earthlinks. We had Mindscape. We had all of these different things, right? You had Netscape. You had this. You had that. Was it Mindspring, right? It wasn't Mindscape.
I followed you. I heard you.
but so you have all of these different ways so you get on, and then it hit, and it was like boom. Everybody can be in the house, right? And the market shook, and then these sites just started to decay and just go down. The ISPs that were created, they had all of these operating costs, so that they couldn't function anymore. With the coins, though, if I create a coin today, the coin don't really disappear just because I'm not using it, right? It may lose value because no one's trading on it, but 10 years from now, if that coin is sitting around there and somebody mines and finds this coin, they can kind of bring it back. And I mean, that's the kind of weird thing that is with the coin, because it's like a perpetual thing that's just out there in this virtual space, because it really holds no value because it's not backed by anything. It only holds a value that people deem that it holds based on if they're willing to trade or sell it for a price, right?
Your analogy about the ISPs from the .com bust was a good one. I think about it. A lot of those companies realize a couple things. The ones that survived, they realize how many people are interacting with our technology, right? So they started to create this multiplier based on how many people came and engaged with their site, as an example. And then they realize, well, how does this actual technology we've created, this website or this stuff, does this have any intellectual property value associated with it? And then they started to survive from there. And I think that that's what some of these guys have got to figure out. To your kind of story about people having it, but no one's interacting with it. At some point, you got to say, well, what's the deal? Is that a real thing? And at some point, you're going to say, is that monetizable at any point? And your point is a good one in a way, because you can sit there and have it held for a while, and then all of a sudden we make something that's everybody in the world wants, and they say, hey, well, I want to buy David and Winston's new bit of technology. And we say the only way you can buy it is to get through our 10-year-old David and Winston coin. That to me is like the extension of the analogy that I think it could be viable at some point. If you want to buy our new dope technology that we figured out, the only way you can do it is through our personalized coin.
that somebody may have been sitting out there holding the whole time. Right? Because they're like, oh, it's only worth a penny, so I might as well, or less than a penny. Why am I going to get rid of this?
Or we can be speculating on ourselves, doing some kind of illegal trading on the back end, making it rise in some value. So when it's ready to go, we get paid on the back end and the front end.
Yep.
So we could be doing some activity around that. So for those of you who are out there, tell us, are you in the cryptocurrency game? Are you part of that? Do you have exposure in it? We're not telling you to not have exposure in it. I think we're telling you that you probably should think about it deeply. And it's not anything that's going anywhere. It's just the key thing is that you got to focus, like how much you want to be involved in it. And if you get deep in it, you got to be prepared to make this like your thing for a minute. It can't be one of these things. Oh yeah, I did one of these things. I put X amount of significant percentage of my money in it, but I don't care. If you're going to put significant money in it, you got to be prepared to be deep in what's going on with cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, Mark Cuban made a great comment where, he said that he bought some of the doggy coin for his son because, he said he would never invest in it, but it's fun to play with, right? But so there's stories right now that are out there where this guy decided to take his life savings. He took his $180 million and $180,000 and put it into Bitcoin, and now he's a millionaire. And it's like, yeah, that's great. That's like 10x, right? That's not even 10x. Great story, guy. But that was, I don't know if I would say that was like a smart move. That was
Wasn't there a story as well about a guy who had a bunch of Bitcoin, and you need a certain encryption code in order to be able to access your coins, and he couldn't find the encryption code, so all of his money, and you have a certain amount of time where you can put it in wrong before all your money is gone. And this guy couldn't find his code, and he's worth millions of dollars. And he had like one more time that if he did it wrong, his money was gone. I was saying to myself, oh my gosh, what a weird bubble that is for him to have to deal with.
Wow. And the interesting thing is that his money, his account ends up getting locked, right? It gets locked away. But some dude that had nothing to do with the purchase that he made of that money is able to sit there and mine and find his money and then take control of it.
Well, the way I understand is these things are in these digital ledgers that are encrypted. So his allocation of it can't be accessed on this digital ledger that exists out there. So it's just a blockchain. It's just a block that he's got on there that no one can ever access if he gets it wrong.
I believe that there's still some way to access it. I think that he just can't get access to it because he don't know how to get access to it.
Wow. Yeah,
because the scary thing to me about some of it is that it's so heavily embedded in technology, and and this may be me just not really understanding the security that can be embedded within it. But I kind of feel like these guys that are just sitting here hacking away at computers all the time. If a significant amount of cash is just available there, how do we stop like the super hacker from being able to come in and just take money as he feels? The
way I understood it is that when this digital ledger is created, every time you create this, because you have to mine it, to your point earlier, once you do it, you mine a Bitcoin or you mine a percentage or part of it, it creates this encryption algorithm that can't be hacked. And it can only be accessed a certain way over a period of time. And then as it goes, it's in this decentralized ledger that people can, that everyone knows where it's at, but no one can really get into it. So hence regular hackers can't use it. That's why a bunch of people are using it for illicit purposes like drugs and stuff like that.
But Winston, this is what I say to it can't be hacked. It can't be hacked now, right? It can't be hacked until it's been hacked.
That's true. Hackers are powerfully smart, and they can create all kinds of algorithms to figure out stuff.
So it's like creating a vaccine for a virus that doesn't exist yet. You're like, this vaccine definitely works. It definitely works because they ain't got nothing to work against. Right.
Wow,
and then all of a sudden you come with something
that's another conversation, because I believe that they've created viruses and vaccines for viruses in labs that don't exist yet. And there was this whole speculation that the coronavirus got out of some lab somewhere. So I wanted to thank Michelle for her comment there. That it was this is a good discussion, and that need more understanding. And you're right, Michelle. We all need deeper understanding, because technology is moving so fast in this regard. Is that as much as I've immersed a certain amount of time in trying to understand it, it's moving faster than I can keep up with. And so that's why those people who are investing in it as this kind of like, it's exciting, fun thing, you probably should do that to have some exposure of it. But just make sure that if you're going to put a significant amount of your money in anything, that you're prepared to be super deep in understanding it.
Yep.
You just got to be ready for it, because it's just like that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Moore's theorem, right?
Yeah, the 18 months of overlapping technology.
Yep.
I would say that premise has been kind of turned upside. It's faster than what he thought it was. It's just 18 months.
Well, I don't know if it's faster, because what his what his theorem was, it was actually an exponential growth, right? So it was based on exponential. So as we acquire more, right, we continue to acquire more faster. So yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think it's incumbent on everybody who's listening to our show here that you've got to keep learning stuff. I know we know people that sometimes say, "Well, I had a certain age, so I got it. I don't need to know nothing. I ain't read no more books. I ain't watching no more this. I got all the answers." You don't, man. Technology, this world is different. It is different than even the world that our parents grew up in, where they could just say, "Hey, this is what it is. I know my thing. I know that." This world is so much different. You got to keep your mind sharp
Yep.
about stuff. The book that I'm reading right now is called Keep Sharp, written by Sanjay Gupta, about how to make sure that your brain is prepared to keep learning even as time goes on. Because we got to keep, of all the things, is one thing. If your hands and your feet and all that don't work well, that's one thing. But your daggone brain got to work right. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
So, for those of you who are out there, answer the question for us. Do you think that this is cryptocurrencies? Is that a growing business, like it's thriving, or do you think it's something that's got a bubble, that is something that we got to watch out for? Because for the first time in the history of this show, this 8th episode of the show, I don't have a good answer for that, whether it's one or the other.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, one thing that we do know, and or that we're pretty sure on, you said it, that it's not going anywhere. But I think that when we do look at the multitude of companies out there, they're not all going to survive, and we don't know what this thing is really going to look like. Well, to me, I don't think we really know what it's going to look like 20 years from now, right? Does Bitcoin stay as the number one, or does another currency supersede it, right?
Ethereum or some, which is like an NFT that's got its own technology and a bunch of ones underneath that. Does that grow beyond that? And I think one thing that we do great in the United States is that we make businesses out of things that don't really exist. There was this book that I always used to tell people in the sales world, is that there's a book written by this guy named Harry Beckworth called Selling the Invisible. So when you're selling something, a lot of times, especially these days, you're selling someone about something that ain't there yet. You're like, you're going to get this new service or you're going to get this new product or something, but it ain't there yet.
Yeah.
So you gotta make sure that they understand the value of how that looks.
Yeah. Creating a need where there is none.
Right. So let's talk about our other thing. And I don't think that it's the same concept for the first time ever. So let's talk about this one. So just like the previous conversation, this conversation is based on technology. And so a couple of years ago, you came to me, and I love technology, and about this VR headset. I have this good friend here in Georgia who that's all he does. He set up his whole basement to have these VR headsets set up. And I went over to his house, very beautiful house, and he had all this VR headset stuff set up, and about how technology was going to take over and how this was going to be the new way of like listening to concerts and listening to things of that kind of nature. Instead of going to a football game, you're going to be able to do it all VR. And it was all really cool. But at the whole time that I was doing this, some things that popped into my head that were really of a concern for me. I was like, this sounds cool, but am I ready for that? Am I ready for goggles to be over my head when I'm trying to do something? I am unbelievably concerned about goggles being over my head when I'm trying to do something, when I'm trying to have entertainment. I love video games. That's episode number 3 or 4, probably episode number 2, I think, that we had, where I love video games, but I was like, I need to be able to have my peripheral vision like ready for me to go at all times. I've heard that Apple is making a new VR headset that you'll be able to use like a pair of glasses. I was like, now that's really freaking awesome. But VR technology itself, and I have this thing here that I'll share about how there's this real debate about whether VR technology is growing or not growing. And I was like, this is a good topic for us to talk about. And this one was about technology and about VR headsets hurting someone's vision, which is something I never considered before. Um, and there's a lot of debate whether it does or does not. And then there was another one, and I'll talk about this here in a second, about whether it's a growing business or not a growing business. And I know, David, you're on one side of the fence with this when it comes to VR headsets, that you think that this is thriving, that everybody's going to use these things and they're going to love them. So now talk about why VR headsets are dope and fantastic.
Well, I don't know if everyone's going to use them, right?
Gotcha.
I don't know if everyone's going to use them, but I know that there's a large part of the population that will, right? And that they'll enjoy using them, right? And that's just because the technology within them has improved dramatically from when they first came. I mean, I guess the difficulty for VR, especially when it first entered into the realm, was that it was competing with 2D imagery and 2D things that we could do that was amazing to us, right? So, you know, and to do a comparison with video games, you know, when we first got an Atari 2600 in the house, there was no comparison, right? It was Atari 2600 or it was like playing electric football, right? There was like no real comparison, anything for you to be like, oh man, but this other thing is awesome, right? So you go to like early VR technology, early VR stuff was kind of like, okay, I can sit here and look at this. It wasn't even 4K TVs at the time. It was like I could look at this 720p screen that right now is amazing me. And then you put on the headset and you look at the VR stuff and you're like, this isn't all that amazing. And then it's like whatever you can do within it, it wasn't so amazing, right? But with these years of development that, you know, these companies have had in order to figure out and start to get it right, now you put on a VR headset and it's not so much that the graphics are amazing, but it's that you are immersed into this environment, right? That makes you feel like you are there, right? So,
you know, I was going to say, you know what changed my mind? Because I was, as much as I love technology and all that, I was not a fan of VR for a number of years, because I was just like, I was just feeling my own personal claustrophobia associated with it. But then I was watching something and I was saying to myself, you know where a good application for this VRs would be? This would be in assisted living and nursing homes, where people are in there for long periods of time. They ain't got nowhere else to go. They are being monitored so people can't, get at them or whatever it was. I was like, if you're in assisted living or a nursing home and you could see the world like a 4K display via VR headsets in there, and you got to be in there anywhere because that's where you live. Like that is like the best application I've seen of these VR headsets ever. I was like, This is the spot. I was like, if they find a way, and this is because, all this pandemic, everyone was talking about nursing homes, assisted living, because that's where a lot of the challenges were. I was like, man, if they could figure out a way to get into there and to get people inside of those places to use this because they need entertainment anyway, I was like, this is a phenomenal place for that.
I mean, not to mention, bringing museums to life, museums that you would have had to travel, thousands of miles to go and see. You'd be able to see a lot of the things that are there up close in a manner that you would have never been able to see them before. But not even just that. I mean, it's there are so many applications that it will potentially be able to have, right? I think that the whole headset thing, putting on a headset, that does require for, a level of safety to be needed around you, right? So I can't foresee someone, you can't like have on a VR headset talking about you about to walk across the street like you're on your phone and you're looking at your phone, right? You kind of like have to be stable and be somewhere. But what I do see is that there's so many applications that it can potentially have. So like how you said the thing about assisted living, right? There are going to be ways for you to be able to interact with other people, right? So people love social media today, where it's like, okay, so I'm using my social media in order to speak to speak to people on Facebook or Twitter, blah blah blah. But then there have been these attempts to try and create like these avatar types of places where people would have their avatar and they walk around and they meet people, right? There are video games that are out there where young people are doing that, right? I have a student that creates this amazing he creates these avatars that he can actually use within the Google Meet and be walking around the place with it. But it takes a lot of time for him to create it. Now just imagine when you have a VR headset and you have a VR headset on and you're walking around and you're meeting people and you're having conversations with people. And this world that you've created isn't just on a screen, it's really all around you, right?
I was going to add to that. I've talked to people about this, and one of the things that's always driven a lot of technology, and this is an adult conversation for those of you who are listening, is porn. And that there's some thought that VR headsets would be good for porn. And I don't know enough about VR nor porn to know whether that's an application or not that makes sense. But there's been a lot of studies that show that porn has helped to drive a lot of technology, mobile headset, mobile technology, tablets, computers, a lot of stuff. Porn has driven a lot of that. So I don't know.
I mean, I would think that, porn would be a great application for a VR headset. I mean, you'd be able to get up close and personal, and for the guys that love that type of thing and the women that love that type of thing, they would be able to be heavily involved. I mean, just from what I've seen with some of the innovations that have happened, touch and feel, where you're able to actually feel as if, I used a headset and I was able to feel as if I was picking up a gun.
What?
And had the gun in my hand, and then was able to point and aim the gun to shoot it.
It was like a haptic. It was like a haptic feedback on the gun and all that.
Yeah, it was a haptic feedback on the actual item that you picked up. So you felt it, you felt texture, and then you felt vibration as you like shot the gun, and you got kickback, like boom. You know what I'm saying?
So my theory about porn might be valid.
Yeah, your theory about porn would be very much on point. And I mean, even when you think about how-to videos, right? So how do I fix a car? Right. And I want to show someone how to fix a car. And I'm doing this in VR and I can see the actual, joint. I'm looking around. I remember when, I was getting married and I was trying to figure out how to tie my bow tie correctly. And I was watching all of these YouTube videos and watching all this stuff. And there was one step that I was missing that I couldn't see when everybody was doing it. And I finally found it out 10 minutes before, like I was about to have to go to the ceremony, where it was just like one little loop that I was missing. I didn't see it in anything that I saw that was like written on. If there was a VR headset that would have gave me the 360 view, I would have saw it.
Well, how would you see when you're tying if you got a headset on? How would you see yourself?
Well, no, I'm saying I would have had the VR headset because it would have been in the 3D type of view for me to actually see how it's being tied, and then I've been able to practice it.
Okay.
VR headset on.
I was. And I'm not sure about. That is an interesting one. Let's put it that way. I think the VRs aren't going anywhere either. But I would say the one piece that's always hampered the technology, and I put some articles up there a second ago, is just the point of entry, as far as the costs associated with them. So if you buy a system, for example, you had like a PlayStation 4 and it costs whatever it costs, $500, and then you got to spend another $200-300 on that. Or if you get some version that's scaled down, I know there were scaled down versions before that was like $100, but the experience was different. So I'm saying to myself, what is the deal? Like, what's the point of entry? Like, how much is it going to cost people to get involved in that technology? Because users will be the people who use it are going to be the ones who are going to say whether it survives or not.
and I think that that's an important thing, right? Because when I look at the future of VR, right, I don't know when VR becomes like a common thing that's in someone's household. You know, I think that right now VR needs to have more exposure, right? People need to use it. They need to see it in motion, right? So I see like these pop up centers that are being created where you can go in and you can use the VR technology. I see like businesses deciding that they want to invest in having VR setups, to do things that behoove them. I think that those are going to be the ways that it works. I've been to the Samsung store, I don't know how many times, where they try to get you put on the VR. They get you to put on the VR headsets, and they got the VR set up here, and they got the VR set up there, and it's kind of like it's the watered down version that you speak about, right? I haven't been in a little while, so I can't speak to like the last maybe 3 or 4 years. I know that I had friends that I went on a trip with friends to the store, and they did it like maybe like 2 years ago, and they were like, "Yeah, it was cool," but it didn't make them walk away like, I gotta have this in my house. So I think right now for VR to survive, because I think that right now they are like in surviving mode, right? They're trying to figure it out. Who's going to use me? How am I going to be used, right? I think that they still need to figure out exactly how do they make sure that people find their way to the headsets and actually use the headsets.
Yeah, I think that the applications you mentioned about business, I could see people using that, depending on the business type, using it as like a training tool.
Yep.
For some businesses, I could see that doing, especially businesses that are hands-on. Back to your haptic point, like medical business, medical students, and stuff like that. I can see that being worked. Or if you're an engineer, I can see those kind of things really, really coming to fore for VR headsets. But whether there'll be a public adoption of it, I think that's my opinion is that that's still a bit off. I mean, the first thing when I heard about this, I was like, I got to get one of those. And I thought about it. I was like, man, I don't want one of those things. Even in my own house, I don't even want one because I need to be able to see stuff. So I don't know if the consumer application if it's going to take off. It'll need something like some of the things we talked about earlier, kind of drive adoption. Like, for example, I was just ready to get it when I heard about this game called Star Trek Bridge Commander, where you'd be on the bridge with a whole bunch of other people in your VR headsets, and one person would be the engineer, one person would be the person who fires the weapons, another person would be the captain. I was like, now that's a great application for VR. But did I pull a trigger on it? Nah, man. It was a great thing, but I was like, I'm not going to do it.
So Erlene just posted, she said, I had an excellent experience at an amusement park with the VR game platform. So, Erlene, just to let you know, last time that Winston was in New York,
oh boy, here it
and
comes.
he's here with his family, I came up with this great idea. There are these, they have these 2 locations in New York City where there are these huge VR virtual reality like game. I don't know what you call them. Virtual reality game, just like arcades or whatever. And basically you go there, you pay, it's like $40-something or something like that, and you get like this 2.5-hour tour where you get to try out all this different virtual reality technology. Next time he comes to New York, we are going. He can't not go now. But he was like, nah, I don't want to go. His wife wanted to go. His son wanted to go. I wanted to go. Nah, we're not going. So next time we're going, and yeah.
Well, I'll make a commitment like this. Is that next time I'm in New York and we're going to go, I'm going to bring a gimbal and do a live stream on Surviving Business, specifically around that. And we're going to live stream using like an iPhone or something. And we're going to live stream right from the VR place there. And you'll be able to get my honest, for real reaction to it. Because the time you were proposing it, the first thing that came after you said all that stuff you just said is I asked, how much does it cost? And for those of you who are watching this, I am not a skinflint by any stretch of the imagination. But once he said how much it costs, I was like, my mind says, what else can we do for? I forgot what the number was.
It was like $40 for like 2 hours.
$40 what per person?
Yeah.
So in my own mind, I went this real quick thing and did this real fast. Said $160 for us to do. What else costs $160 that we could do here? That's a blast. So,
and what do you think he came up with? Drinks and some food. Which is what we're gonna do anyway. So but that's the thing, right? So there's a cost that a cost that can always seem to be a little prohibitive, right? So for a one-time experience, $40. If I look at going to experience all these different virtual reality experiences for $40 in comparison to going to a 3D movie or a 4D movie, which is $30, right? Or just going to a regular movie, which is $20 in New York. I'm going to say the virtual reality experience probably is going to top both of those hands down 4 times, 10 times better.
I'm saying to myself, $40. Like, can we go to a great theater show for $40? The answer is probably yes. Can we go to a nice musical event of some kind for $40? The answer is yes. Can we get some? We probably can't get cheap tickets to a Nets game or something. But with all of those things,
No.
I'm just saying at the moment, my mind was going through all of these things that I was saying to myself, what else costs $40? And is VR ready to supplant or be part of that kind of mix? And at the time, my brain said, no, there's a whole lot of other cool things that can happen. That's why they need like the application, like this thing that's going to make people go, yo, you got to see that on VR, or you got to do that on VR in order for people to say, I want to spend $40 to do that.
Yeah, and Erlene, I think you're 100% correct. The goggles, I don't think they can change them, right? Because you have to be immersed in this experience, right? With all your senses, yeah. So, for them to take the goggles away, I know that there are, so remember Google tried to come out with their Google Glass, right? But that wasn't VR, right? No, that was something else.
Well, right? The reason why people hated that part was because they put a camera in it, a camera that could take a picture of you.
Yep.
While and people were like, no way, privacy, no way you can be taking pictures of me when I'm not ready to take a picture of me.
And it also looked a little silly. So, that didn't help it out either. People are very vain with how they look, especially when they're out in public. So,
right. If you ain't ready to take a picture of me and I don't know you taking a picture of me, right? I think they try to make another version that would like blink or something that when you were taking a picture, but still that wasn't good. Like I know for a fact when you got one of these things and you ready to take a picture, you gotta like look at me, you gotta point at me, and I'd be like, yo, why are you taking a picture of me?
Nah, it's so easy because like people always have their hands on their phone, right? So, and now you can like take the picture by clicking here, clicking there. People take pictures of you all day. You never know. You never know.
I'm just saying, there's a thought philosophically in your own mind. if you got a camera and you taking pictures, and I don't know when you taking pictures, that's not a cool thing. So. Yeah. I'm looking at Erlene's most recent comment. That's right, Erlene. Your comment is the same as mine about that $40. Like if it was like $10 or $15 or something, maybe that would have made sense. But at the time, $40 it seemed like a long way to go.
But see, the thing is, so they're running a business also, right? And if you're running a business, you got to manage your supply and your demand, right? So you have a VR space, it can only hold but so many people. You're operating in Manhattan, and on the weekends they have long wait lines, right? So they actually do have where you have to make an appointment sometimes. So it's $40 was for like the 2.5 hour experience. And I think it was like $60 for like a 4 hour experience or something like that. But
What happens when you got to use a bathroom?
when there's a bathroom in there. No.
You got
So
to take the goggles off, and you got to go. How does that
listen,
work?
it's my understanding. We didn't get to go, so I don't know exactly what happened. But my understanding is that like they have different games set up like in different areas. So you're like walking through the building. So you stop like at like here, and they have this particular goggle set that's set up for you to do a certain thing. And then you like walk and then you go to the next one. You know, you're there for like 10 minutes and you walk and you go to the next one. And the next one might be set up like for like a boxing game. So like you're wearing like boxing gloves and you have like their boxing thing set up. So it's supposed to be like an amazing experience. Everybody that I saw that wrote it said that it was awesome.
I wonder if they have these things in like a Dave and Buster's, or like in Georgia, there's this place called Andretti that has like those laser tag things,
Yep.
where you run around doing laser tags.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they have that there, because I could see some application of that being there. Because when you were just describing it, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a lot of exercise, doing all that stuff. So I was like, I wonder if they have that in those places. Because I could see that stuff maybe working in those arenas.
I think that it would work great in those arenas. I just think that Dave and Buster's, it's like the VR. They need to sell it there, right? They need to sell it because if the VR is there, and I think Dave and Buster's, they do have certain things that are VR, but like when they are there, they cost like exponentially more than playing any other game. So like for me to go and use the VR enabled type of game that's at a Dave and Buster's, it's like $6 or like $10 or something like that for like a minute.
Oh.
You know,
Wow.
so because they have to spend a lot of money in order to get this, and then they have to like do uptake, and they got to do, and it's a price point. It's always thinking about, we always got to think about when you're running a business, how do I make sure that people are actually going to be able to get on this thing, right? And part of the way is by price prohibition, right?
Yeah, and then you're making a point here that is kind of linked to Erling's comment, is that it will require businesses to make significant investments in their entertainment in order to do it. So can a business who's charging $40 do it? Or can a business like the Dave and Buster's, or even the places like Six Flags and those kind of places who already have to they got to invest in new entertainment anyway? Are those places that are more focused or more ready to do that? I think that's probably where you got to think about where a VR application is. I think in one of our previous episodes, we were talking about amusement parks. And for me, like if you go to an amusement park in Georgia now, it's mad hot. And so I'm looking for like a spot like where I have to be in the heat the whole time. And so I could see myself going into an arcade that has a VR headset that's secure, where I'm not worrying about my wallet or nothing. And I can see myself going into that, because you have to do that. I can't see the applications of me having it in my house. It's just like how they try to make 3D TVs in your house. That's just like, it's not going to work. But I can see those places would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. When we look at Great Adventures, there I am with the S at the end. When we look at Great Adventure, or we look at or Six Flags, or we look at Disney, and we look at those type of parks, and we say like, okay, how do they take advantage of VR? It's a hard question even for them, because they have to think. They have to think about capacity. And how people are going to be able to take part in this experience. So for the amusement parks, they're used to being able to have multiple people experience the same thing at the same time. VR is more of an individual thing for the most part. So they would have to they've created like their 4D theaters and those type of things, because they're like, okay, so we can still get like a whole bunch of people in, and this is still like our regular model. But once they go to like VR, it's a little, I think it may be a little, I think the challenge for those places is figuring out, how do they work that into their regular cycle flow, right? And to make sure that when someone comes and they're like, I want to be on the VR, that the time is not prohibitive, that they don't see like these serious long lines and they're like, I can never get on the VR, So I don't know. It's an interesting perspective for them. And also because of the amount of investment that they have to do, they even say like, do people really want this yet? Are they really going crazy about it?
Yeah.
So
great topics as always. Thank you all for joining, and for those of you who will see the final cut of what we've got here, please make sure you subscribe. We will be talking about spending time and doing a free consultation for anyone who's part of our show. So you subscribe, you give us a comment, like the great comments that Earlene and Michelle gave us, and others who have given that in the past. We will be picking someone and we'll just say, hey, what's your business about? Bringing them on the show, talking to them about how we can help their business. So please make sure you subscribe to that. Our next episode is something we got to continue to think about. I think we're ready for that, but we want to make sure that you, the audience, have a time to give us your input. So go to our Facebook page, go to wherever you see David and I on social media and say, hey, why don't you guys talk about this? Why don't you talk about that? Because when you make sure that we're engaging you and bringing you into the conversation, because there's so many businesses that are doing really well. And there's so many businesses out there that we can talk about and we can help them. If you're interested in our services, we'll spend some time talking to your business about how do we grow your leadership capacity within your business, and also how do you get your financial acumen and your financial posture in place. So that is what we'll be doing as far as WD Consulting. So David, any comments for our people who've joined us today or who talked to us in the past? Any final comments from you?
Yeah, great episode again. Thank you guys for being here and asking us great questions and giving great input. I think we get more input than questions though.
That's okay.
Which is awesome because the input is very helpful. And just looking forward to keeping this going.
That's awesome. So those of you out there, please make sure you continue to get with us. We will talk to you in the next episode of Surviving Business. Have a fantastic